Hi. Sorry, I couldn't find the password for a little bit. Charlene, hi.
Okay.
Hello.
So one moment while we get this situated.
How are you all doing this week? Those faces I can see anyway. Everybody okay? These are scary times. I was just looking
It
at
has been
two things
raining and
popped up.
storming in Little Rock, Arkansas.
We had hail bouncing off of our air conditioners here in New York City. I mean, like big hail. It's crazy.
Okay, can everybody hear me and Eloisa?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So everybody that's participated before knows how this works. Go ahead and put your comments in the Zoom chat window. We have a series of questions already that we have in our forum. If I can actually track those down. First, Eloisa, can you give us background on where you got your idea for the Wild series?
Oh, well, let's see. It's been a couple years now, but I was actually thinking about books that I love, which is often how you start by writing a book. And I was thinking how much I like the Bridgertons. Are you guys into the Bridgertons? So Julia is one of my close friends, and I was thinking how whenever I get sick, I go back and I reread the Bridgertons. And I thought I would really like to create a large family like that. It just gets along really well. And then a second thing about the Wilds is it doesn't mostly take place in London. And this book actually does. But a lot of it takes place in a big old castle on the edge of a bog. And I just felt like I've written so many books in London, I'd like to write something a little different. So that was kind of the beginning of it all.
And the second question is, you have shared that your next book is going to be Joan's book, but you have also mentioned that you have started thinking about what your next series is going to be about. If that's the case, what's the future for the rest of the Wilds?
Well, I don't actually know what I'm doing. I mean, I'm writing Joan's book right now, and it's going really well. It's a very funny book, so that's a lot of fun. So that's going fine. But then the next thing I have to figure out is whether I write Horatius's book, bring him back from the dead, or whether I move on to the next series. So if I move on, I don't go back to series usually. You know, I have readers write me all the time and say, oh, I wish you would do that character or this character or some character in the past. But generally, I kind of move on to a new idea. So my new idea is it's going to be 3 young women who had one parent who was an aristocrat and one parent, and that parent ran away from home and like joined the circus or joined a commune. You know, they had nudist communes back then. They had all kinds of crazy stuff. So all 3 of them grew up actually with aristocratic blood, but because the one parent had run away to the circus, for example, they grew up in very unusual circumstances. And an eccentric millionaire, because why not? I love an eccentric millionaire, decides to bring them all back. He wants to bring his daughter back, and his daughter is one of these lost aristocrats, and he gets her to come home by saying, your daughter, my granddaughter, needs to have a chance to debut, to go on the market, to have all the chances you had. You chose to run away, but she hasn't even had that chance. And so these 3 very unusual young women are going to come back and be on the market together. And there again, the idea came out of one of my friends, because I really love Lisa Kleypas's book on the wallflowers. And so I thought it'd be really fun to have my version of 3 women who were very eccentric and you know, didn't fit in. Because you're not going to fit in if you grew up in a circus and then, you know, you're back there. So
That sounds awesome. Okay, what made you write a heroine being Viola, or Viola, whichever you say it, with anxiety?
Viola, I mean, she's very shy, and I grew up very shy. And I grew up, I wanted to write about the situation I think probably a lot of young women and men have in middle school, which is when you overhear someone saying something really mean about you, and it kind of sticks with you for life. And Viola's story is really the redemption of my middle school self, because when she's behind the curtain and she hears the Duke saying the one thing about her that she always feared, which is that she's not a real wild, she waltzes out from behind that curtain and he falls dead in love with her. And I mean, let's face it, if I look back at my middle school, that would have been a wonderful thing to happen. Unfortunately, it did not happen. But I got my revenge in print, as it were. Because he walks out from behind the curtain and he's like, I don't care if she's a wild, I don't care who she is. I just want her. I want to be with her. So it's a revenge book. It's a revenge book for every girl who was shy and had people say mean things about her. So.
And is Viola based off of a character from the 12th Night?
No.
Okay.
No, she's not. I just like the name. And when I was planning all the wilds, the Duke of Lindau named all his children after warriors, which is why you have Boadicea, Betsy is Boadicea, the great female warrior, and you have Joan of Arc coming up. And then I wanted Ophelia to have named her daughter, because Ophelia is a Shakespearean name. She gave her daughter a Shakespearean name, but also I wanted Viola to be the absolute opposite of a warrior. She is not a warrior, right? She's Viola, and she's shy and she's timid, and she gets dumped into the nursery, which is full of young warriors, because the family's a very happy one. They're very confident children. So it was just fun doing that, having someone who was opposite. And unfortunately, when you're planning a series, you have to plan it a long way ahead of time. So you plan all the names, you have to plan all the personalities a little bit way ahead of time.
Very true. And is there going to be, we're a little bit disoriented with our questions because they're all over the place on here. Is there going to be more from the Vicar in a later series?
No, I did love him, and I'm so happy I got to give him his own little romance. But you know how it is. I'm moving on. So there's a lot. I'm writing Joan's book now, and so far I have Lady No and I have Otis, a lot of Otis, because Joan is cross-dressing to play the title role in Hamlet. And her father says, well, the only way I'm going to let you play Hamlet, who's a prince, is if Otis will cross-dress and play your girlfriend, because I'm not having you play opposite a professional actor as your, that's not happening, right? Forget it. So Otis agrees to get in a corset, and there's it's just a performance in the castle. It's I'm having a lot of fun writing it, but it's one of those things where I don't want to spend any time on Hamlet. Like, no one's interested in Hamlet. So I'm talking about a play without you're never going to see the play. So it's kind of more like what it's like to get on a corset, and, he has a huge wig and a hat, and then they go to a fair. That's what I've been writing in the last few days. They go to a fair, which is a lot of fun, trying to sort of try out their clothing, So she's wearing breeches and he's wearing a dress. And her hero is unbelievably uptight. I mean, he's probably the most uptight hero I've written in a long time. And so just furious about the whole thing. Can't stand it. Cannot believe she's in breeches. So it's fun. I'm having fun with it. Good.
How has quarantine impacted your writing?
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Well, it's better now, but I'm the head of my department, my English department. I teach at a university, and that means I'm the head of all the English faculty for 3 different campuses. And we had to go online, as I'm sure you've heard about it, those of you who have anything to do with the university. We had to go online in 2 days. And my faculty is not all that technically adept. So there were a few months there when I didn't do any writing, because I spent all my time sort of trying to help people teach, and then teaching myself online. Are any of you teachers in elementary or otherwise? And it's a challenge, I'll tell you. It's a real challenge. I had a very sweet class. I mean, I loved my class before we went online. Not that I just disliked them after we were online, but it was so much more challenging looking at this little screen. You know, we do it on Zoom. Um, so are we recording? We're recording now. Okay. Um, so yeah. Do you mean to be recording?
Yes. It was recording before I just changed it so you're the spotlight video because it kept hopping around apparently to people moving. So
Yeah. I can tell you from class that if everyone doesn't mute, it will hop everywhere.
Yep. Can you talk about your parents' influence on your writing?
Sure. I mean, my parents were very literary and they were very organic before that became a thing. So like I grew up without any white sugar and pretty much lots of vegetables. And I grew up on a farm and no TV at all. We could have 10 cents worth of candy on Sunday if we were good in church after Sunday school, which when I was growing up, 10 cents actually got you, you know, a piece of candy. So that had a huge influence on me because they were reading all the time. They were both writers. My dad won the American Book Award for poetry, and my mom was a short story writer. And you know, she actually had a film made of one of her stories. It was in Sundance. It was in the Sundance thing, Robert Redford's group. And so for them, literature was a very serious thing. It was something you took seriously and you tried to be like Tolstoy. For me, growing up, it was an escape, which looking back, I understand. I mean, you sort of, you know, you use the tools you have. And what I wanted to do was escape from that farm in a big way. I just wanted out. So for me, I liked Harlequin Presents. I liked Barbara Cartland. I liked Georgette Heyer. I liked everything that my parents found was just terrible, terrible escapist literature. I loved sci-fi. I liked mysteries. My mother only liked Dorothy Sayers was the only mystery writer because, you know, she had a PhD in classics and wrote a book on I don't know what, Horatius Horatio or something. Whereas me, I would read everything, like the Narnia stories, if you read those. I mean, I read those for the romance. So I just came out of the egg the way I did, and it was a mystery to them. But I think that part of it, looking back, is that if you try to get your children to be the way you are, it's not going to work out. It just is not. And it worked in some ways in that everything, you know, every weekend it'd be like, what are you going to write? What's your project? What are you doing? Are you writing a play? What are you writing? Because that's what we did for entertainment. And I had two step siblings and three more children. And I was the oldest. So I wrote a lot of plays and put them on and made them act them out. And, you know, and I wrote stories and everything. But now that I'm this old, I realize that you cannot shape your children into what you think they're going to be. And I really love marshmallows. My mother hated marshmallows. She was like, that's the most chemical, fake thing in the world. And I have to say, one thing about COVID has been that I'm doing a lot of comfort eating. And so I have little bags of miniature marshmallows out there. Because I don't know about you guys, but I mean, we're in serious quarantine here in New York. My daughter has kidney disease. So I hardly ever get out of this apartment. Everything is delivered because she would not do well if she caught COVID. So it's been intense. Yeah.
What was the first romance novel you ever read?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, the first one I have a clear memory of is I Captured the Castle. Has anyone read that? It's by the same woman who wrote 101 Dalmatians. It's a really beautiful romance. But I mean, you know, Charlotte's Web has a romance in it. If you're like me and you see a romance, if you remember Charlotte's Web, Fern gets asked to go on the merry-go-round with a boy. Even when I was reading that age 8, I was like, nobody's ever gonna ask me to go on a merry-go-round. But I read that part over and over again anyway. So I grew up on a farm and she was on a farm. I was like, this is great. So I Captured the Castle, says Emily. It's a wonderful book. I mean, I totally recommend it. It's beautifully written and it's very romantic, in a lovely way.
outside of historical romance, what is your favorite subgenre of romance?
Well, I really like paranormal, so I'm reading a lot of Alona Andrews right now. But I mean, I have to tell you, I read everything. I've been reading Harlequin Presents lately because they're just so they're so satisfying. They're exactly the same. You know, you got the Sheik, he's angry, whatever. He's like, get out of here. I've been reading a lot of angry billionaires, you know. And I have what is it? I have a favorite writer named Abby, and I'm blanking on her name, so I'm just going to look at it really fast in Harlequin Presents. And so I kind of catch up with her every 2 years. You know how fast they write, so I just got to catch up with all of her books, which was fun. Let's see. Come on. Anyway, I can't find her, so let's see. Library. Oh, I know. Yeah, my thing's not working. I mean, I love paranormal. I love sci-fi now is a new thing. I love, there's more of it, right? I love, well, I just reread All, which was about 210 books by Betty Niels, also during the quarantine. If you've read her, she writes like nurse books. Lisa's asking, how is my rug refab going? It's going really well. Do you guys want to see? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to show you. All right, so I just tell you what happened. We have an old, I don't know what, you know, some kind of rug in our living room that was given to us for a wedding. And, you know, my son is 26, so that was a long time ago. And we've had old dogs and people threw up on it and peed on it. And then when we got to quarantine, we bought this little robot called a Roomba. Does everybody have a Roomba or anyone have one? I mean, I love this thing, but it has taken the fluff off of this rug, and I don't care because I'm not giving up that Roomba ever because my dust allergy has like gone away. It's incredible. So anyway, it started getting white, and I got this idea. I was like, well, I can paint it or I could color it in with markers. Why not? I mean, here we are, right? Why not be creative? So that's what I've been doing with Anna. I got some fabric markers. So I'm going to take you over here and show you. First, I'll show you, I have to turn the light on in there first. First, I'll show you one of the big flowers that is not colored in yet. So you can see what it looks like, very thread worn. Okay, here we go. Can you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah, see how the little white lines and everything? Okay, now look at this. See how bright they are? Does it show?
Yeah, it's looking awesome.
Yeah, it's looking really good, isn't it? Alessandro said today, he was like, I don't know, it's getting a little IKEA. I was like, just shut up. This is not IKEA. I mean, it's true that whoever the guy was who originally wove it, he didn't seem to approve of the color purple, or maybe they didn't have it in whatever country he was in. I don't know. We're putting in purple, and my daughter has a little bit of fondness for neon. I'm not sure the neon orange really fits the ethos of the sort of hand knotted rug. But the great thing about this is that rug means nothing to anyone but us, and it was worthless when we started coloring it, and now it looks kind of beautiful again, and it's going to be ours. I mean, it's going to be totally ours when we finish. It's like adult coloring taken to the next level, basically. That's fun. I'm enjoying it. I was doing it today before we called. We're listening to Criminal Minds, which is really, really disturbing. So I don't watch the TV. I just color on my rug, and then I listen to the women screaming on Criminal Minds. If you've seen that show, my family is really into it, but it's violent.
So most of your books have overall a lot of animals in them. Mm-hmm. Where did you get the idea from that? And where did you get the idea from? And two, how do you decide which animals you're going to feature?
Well, I grew up with a lot of animals because we had a lot of animals on the farm. So, you know, I had sheep, chickens. We had fancy chickens. We had horses. We had a cow, but she died. we had every kind of animal you can think of. And my kids have had everything you can have in the city. So we've had guinea pigs and dogs and cats and rats, which were actually, believe it or not, my favorites, which is why pet rats went into one of the books. I think that was 7 Minutes in Heaven. Anyway, we've just had lots of animals, and I love animals. So this, I could tell you what's happening in Joan's book that's really fun and different. And that is that they go to the fair. So they go to Drabblefield Fair, and I've been looking at what happens in these fairs, and they would have all these animal tents, right? And they were sort of like almost like circus things. You'd pay tuppence to get in. So the first thing that Joan goes into, followed by her hero, who's very, very disapproving, is Leviathan, the snake who ate the world. And you go in there and there's huge coils of a snake, enormous, greasy coils. And then at the top, this snake looks up and its tongue is out and she's like, ah! And, the hero's like, whatever, let's go. And then he's like, that's a grass snake. And they had, made all the coils. You would figure this out, but it's all made out of clay. And then they have a little grass snake on top. But she's an actor, so she loves it. She embraces, anything make believe. So for her, she didn't even think about it being a fake snake. Well, then they go to Percy, the fortune-telling pig. And Percy is the smartest swine in the fair. And he will answer any question for an extra tuppence. He squeals once for no and 2 for yes. And obviously, it's kind of hard to get a little piglet to squeal without hurting that little piglet. So one thing leads to another, and they come home with Percy the piglet, who's still kind of fuzzy, with the big pink ears. You know how baby pigs are fuzzy, with big pink ears and sweet eyes? So he's coming home, and in Viola has 2 cows named Cleopatra and Daisy. And so they put Percy into a little stall right next to Cleo, and Cleo puts her head in between the bars, and she's taking care of Percy, because they were a little worried he would miss his mother, but no, it's okay, he's got a cow. So I don't know, these books are just fun. It's fun to think about animals. It's fun to add an animal character, so I like it.
And Asma asks, have you ever had, okay, I just lost the question.
Charlene is right. We're going to have piglet images everywhere in the castle, because I have to tell you, I started looking at piglets. I mean, I just went down a rabbit hole on piglet babies. If you look at piglet babies, they're so cute, and there's such cute videos, and you could just stay there all day long. So anyway, sorry, go ahead. You had a question.
Oh, you're fine. Have you ever had a hero whose heroine became someone other than first planned, or vice versa?
Oh yeah, totally. If you look at the back cover copy of A Duke of Her Own, you will probably notice that back cover copy is heading at a different heroine than the one who actually turns out. And the readers are like, you tried to trick us. The fact is that I run late on my book. So like the cover copy for Joan's book is already written, the cover is done, and I'm nowhere near done with the book. So I often have to work with, because they're like, what should we write the cover copy about? I have to write it because I'm the only one that knows the book, because it's still in my head. So in that one, I had decided, I hadn't quite made up my mind, and I had to change. And then to give you another example, I wrote a book, which I'm blanking on. I think it's This Duke of Mine, which is a copy, it's sort of a version. It's one of the fairy tales. It's The Princess and the Pea. And I had twin girls, and one of them was incredibly sweet, and one of them was incredibly rebellious and engaged to somebody. And I wrote 100 pages of that book, if you read it, with the really sweet twin. But then I went to a bar with a friend. I was like, this book is not working. She was a writer, and we were sitting in a wine bar, and she was like, that's because you've got the wrong twin. And I had to go home and start over, just because I run late. Very distressing for my editor. But there's another one. If you read it, you can imagine what it would be like.
And our next question is from Amy. Will Aunt No's story ever be told?
No, because Aunt No is one of my favorite characters, but And I've got a lot of mail asking that she falls in love, or is she a lesbian? Is she this? Is she that? I really think of No as someone who is perfectly happy in herself. She has never needed anyone. She has no interest in it. And if you think about it, her brother treasures her and always has. He's had 3 duchesses, and she has always run the nursery, and she has, had a lot of power. And so for her to marry someone would be giving up that place she's got, that in which she's made so much into her own. And I don't think she would. I don't think she'd be interested either. If she was interested in a man, because she is not actually a lesbian, but I don't think she's very interested in men or women, to be honest. She's very happy. She's a very happy person. And she learns a lot. She does all this herb stuff, and she's the midwife, and she's just constantly learning. So one of the fun things about Joan's book is that Viola is on the verge of giving birth. So that's kind of fun. Viola's going to give birth during the book. And
now we know that the next one is generally a controversial question, but it has to be asked. How does it feel to be the creator of what feels like to be one of the biggest conspiracies in romance history? Do you wish you could have $1 for every time someone asks if Horatius is really dead?
Yes. Please send in your dollars. I mean, the thing is, I'm not sure what to do. I don't know if I should tell you guys that. I'm just not sure what to do. I have the next one planned, but on the other hand, the preponderance of mail I get is about Horatius, and everyone is sending me in ideas for what's been happening to him. And I don't like, in my life, there have been times when I didn't listen to readers in the middle of a series, and there have been times when I did. And like one of the times when I did was with the Essex sisters, if you've read that. When I started writing Josie's story, and she was in the first book in the Essex sisters, which was Much Ado About You, Josie was just a plump 13-year-old teenager. And I sort of, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, she'll go on the market, as it were, in 5 years, 6 years, whatever. She can, she'll get thinner or something. I didn't really think about it, but it became very clear to me over the next 3 books that Josie had needed to be the person she was at 13, and her experiences had to reflect the experiences of a lot of my readers who wrote me. And I learned from that book that it's really important to listen to readers. They often know better than the writer, because we can get fixed in our head. And so I hear you all. I hear you about Horatius. And yeah, so I'm thinking about it, and I'm talking to my editor about it. It's not, one of the things that happens in publishing is you are contracted for a certain number of books, and you're contracted for a certain number of wild books in my case. So there's a contractual issue there too. But I have to finish Joan's book. I don't have to worry about it right now. So I don't know. Would you guys all like to see Horatius' book? Yeah.
Yeah. You have a cult following for it.
I know. He's kind of so. I did it once before when I got a cult following for, not the Duke of Villiers, but the guy who came before the Duke of Villiers, and I'm blanking on his name now. And people were actually making mouse pads with his name on them, and so I finally married him off too. Make everyone happy. Leah's saying she's okay with Horatius being dead. Thank you. That's nice.
So we're getting to the end of our thread of questions, then I'll get everybody's in the chat. In the book, Lavinia claims that the Wilds started the debutantes wearing white and pastel trends. Where did you come up with the idea?
I made it up. A lot of the stuff I make up. Well, I had this situation where Betsy felt, or Viola felt, sort of like she didn't fit in. And I wanted her clothing. For one thing, I wanted Lavinia in there. because I just love Lavinia. She's one of my favorite characters. So I wanted her in the book, and I wanted a change. I wanted them to stand out in a really important way. And so I wanted a fashion revolution, and they were not wearing white for debutante balls at that period. So I took it on, did it myself. If you think about it, really think about it, the white came in with the Regency period when you have those very thin white gowns that were based on Grecian garments. So I have made it in the Georgian period, so it actually doesn't quite work. But hopefully none of you noticed that.
That's the beauty of romance writing. You can flex a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. Just I hope that you see it in your own head and you don't have to worry too much about historical verisimilitude.
Will Otis ever find love?
I don't know. I mean, Otis is so great, but here he is cross-dressed in a dress. He's not trans or anything like that. He just agreed to do it, but it's a little hard to get a guy out of a dress and then have him fall in love. You know, he's more like her best friend at this moment. So I can't never say never. I don't know what's happening, but I will tell you that the hero in this book has got to protect Joan, right? And Joan is actually going to act in a public performance, which is incredibly dangerous, and she could easily be ruined. And he's like, "You're not going unless I go." And she's like, "What are you doing? You're going to be in the theater, you know, cart? There's no excuse for you being there." And then Otis says, "Oh yeah, sure, he can be in love with me." And so he's going to go along with Otis as his mistress. So it's a farce. It's a farce, this book. But I think we all need funny stuff now. I need to laugh. I can't. I've been trying to pick up books that I love, that I've always loved, that have like drama in them, and I'm not doing well with the drama. I'm kind of skipping those sections. So I just want funny stuff right now, and that's what I'm going to write.
If you could create a retreat for your readers anywhere around the world, where would you take them?
I would do it in Italy because, you know, we go to Italy every summer because my husband's Italian, and here we are locked down in New York, and we have this lovely little apartment that he inherited from his aunt in Italy with a beautiful garden. And our neighbors keep putting their camera through the window. Our garden is insane because they're actually getting like the best rain. The grapes are like out. There's, you know, the roses are entwined with the grapevines. I can't believe I'm not there. So yeah, I take all you guys to Italy. We could have a retreat in a small town outside Florence, in one of the little mountain towns that are all like, they're still the medieval walled villages. The food is unbelievable. They cost almost nothing. Of course, everyone has COVID, but they all have COVID over here too. So big deal. Actually, we are not allowed to land in Italy. So my Alessandra and my kids could go, but I never got my Italian passport, even though I've been married for a long time. So I can't go to Italy because Americans are banned because we are, you know, carrying more COVID than anyone else. So alas.
Certainly. When you wrote The Vicar, did you base it off of anyone from Grantchester? Do you watch Grantchester? What inspired the love triangle?
I don't watch Grantchester. Is that something I should watch? I don't even know what it is. What is it? Is it like Downton Abbey?
It's kind of like that. It's one of the creators from Downton Abbey is actually involved in the writing of the show, and it's about a vicar in England, and he's stuck in a love triangle.
Oh, really? A vicar?
Yep.
No, no, I haven't, but I got to tell my husband about that. He loves British shows. He is obsessed by those small villages. I think he just found something called Midsummer Murder that he's watching. I can't, generally I find those shows kind of slow, but no, I don't know. For that one, I was thinking about, you know, when you've written this many books, you get very familiar with the rules of society, right? And the rules really were, if you were a second son, you know, like you went into the military, the third son went into the church. And at some point you question it. It's like, what if this kid really was not good at the church? Like Otis is a disaster. He's a disaster, but he's an honest disaster. You know, after 2 weeks, he's like, I'm out of here. I am never going to be able to give anyone absolution. And this is a travesty. So I think that must have happened more often than we think. And so I wanted to make a little secondary plot around that. And I initially thought that Viola might fall in love with the vicar. And then as soon as I got my blue-eyed vicar going, I was like, he just doesn't have it for me. He's not coming up as an alpha. And, you know, I love an alpha. So I had to bring in a duke because it just wasn't working. I liked that plot line, but it didn't work. I try a lot of plot lines. So I hope this isn't too disturbing for everyone. I know that readers like to think of a book as just like, this is the way it is. But often I have to try one thing and then delete it and then try another thing. I think the point at which I can write a book straight through is probably when I start calling it in. I should retire. I should quit. Because it's surprising how hard it is. Like I was actually talking with Lisa Kleypas this morning on Zoom, and we were bemoaning the fact that we had both written so many books, and yet it's still incredibly hard. And by the way, the book she's writing right now is like the cutest, funniest thing is lovely. She's got another one of her non-aristocratic heroes. He makes whiskey and he's rough and tumble, and she's a Victorian lady, and I love it. I think it's just hysterical. So she too, like we're both like, we have to be in a happy place right now. So.
Do you have a favorite trope to work with?
Well, I like convenient marriage, honestly. That's what I've written. I love Cinderella too. But I really love convenient marriage because if you're writing, it's hard to figure out how to bring people together. And yet I think that, you know, sex is a really important way by which people get to know each other. And I shudder to think about, you know, marriages back in the day when you like walked in, this guy has got syphilis and you're married to him and there's no escape, you know, no divorce, nothing. So I like to bring people together beforehand just because it makes me easier. It's another reason why I always have an epilogue with children, because historically so many women died in childbirth that I always want all my readers to know that my heroines had babies and survived. It's just my private anxiety about childbirth. So.
Have you found it difficult to promote a book during this time period?
Well, you know, my tour got canceled, so I maybe would have been meeting some of you guys at KissCon in Chicago this last spring. I had a bunch of places I was supposed to go to, like the Buns and Roses conference. There's 300 people coming up, but I can't do any of those. So that was difficult in a way. And another way, it's been a little easier because here I am at home. And, you know, I can just turn on Zoom and like talk to people. And I enjoy talking to people. And I like the fact I don't have to put on makeup and get on a plane and figure out my clothes and leave my family behind. And I like these little Zoom calls. So they set me up with a bunch of them, and that has worked really well for me. And I think I've been lucky. Last time I heard the sales are only behind by 1%, which is not bad, from the book before, considering that people are not reading as much. So you guys are intrepid readers who keep it going. But I think a lot of people are watching more TV. I know I am watching a lot more. I watched 13 seasons of Bones. I mean, you know, before I stopped going to university, I did not have time for Bones. But now I do. Has anyone seen Bones?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that thing has a perfect romance arc. I could have written it myself. I mean, I knew, you know, it was way more dragged out than one of my books, but perfect romance arc. So I approved.
If you could recommend one of your books to a first-time Eloisa James reader, which book would it be?
Well, I could tell you the favorite. So the reader, I would say the hands down reader favorite internationally is When Beauty Tamed the Beast. It has been a favorite in pretty much all the countries. I think I'm translating about 26 languages, and That's the one I hear about the most. And I get these adorable letters, you know, using the Google Translate. So I got one today from Lithuania. She's like, I'm using Google Translate. Half of it didn't make any sense, but it was lovely. And she showed me her picture of Beauty Tamed the Beast. So I think that's a good one because everybody knows Beauty Tamed the Beast, and most people know House MD, which is the hero is based on House MD. So it's kind of fun to see those two things come together. I think that Say Yes to the Duke, my new one, seems to be another crowd favorite. I'm not getting very many complaints, and it has a lot of happy reviews. I don't actually read the reviews, but I go and look at the stars on Amazon. It seems like people are giving a lot of stars, so that's good. Yeah, and Liat is asking, do you think people recognize Dr. House? Yes, because they all write me letters. Yeah, and I did just answer. But they write me. They're like, I was thinking about House, and then, yeah. So I didn't actually watch all that much TV before I wrote that book, but I was in a plane coming back from Italy, and you know they have TV they have TV shows on the screens now, the little screens, and so I watched 3 episodes of House MD, and then when I got home, I read 6 years of scripts online because all the scripts are online. And then I figured out how to write my own version that would make sense for my period and, you know, be the fairy story. I wanted Beauty Tamed the Beast. So it was a lot of fun. It was really, that book wrote itself. So some books are just a joy to write. You don't have to go back and tear up 100 pages. You write a scene and you're laughing out loud and you know it's great. Or you know that it's just going to pull the heartstrings, or you find yourself crying along with it. That really, right? I am rewriting a book right now. I'm going to have a different book coming out next summer in hardcover under my real name, which is Mary Bly, and it is a tearjerker. It's a love story about someone who has cancer, and I know it works because I cry when I'm rewriting it. So it's not going to work for everyone, but for someone who wants to read that story, it's going to work. Mm-hmm. So that's, you need, when you're writing, you need that solid feeling like that. Yes, this is working. Like when I was writing the Percy the Pig scene last week, I was like, yes, Percy is working. I would like to have Percy in my family. When you're writing an animal, you always want to know, like, would you like to have him in your family? Yeah. I used to have a tame cow, so Cleo was fine.
And the next one, actually, we will just go off of Liat because that's fixed right now. Why the name Eloisa James?
Well, we were trying to figure out what to name Anna, who's now in college. And at the same time, they wanted to know what I was going to name myself. And I knew that I wanted to have a unique name. And so I had seen this name on a fence post in Florence. It said, call Eloisa, lose 20 pounds in 20 days. Chiama Eloisa. And I was like, I love it. Eloisa is the best name. I'm going to be that. And my husband was like, no, that is a very new name. It's you know, it's a terrible new name. It's a fake name. It's not really an Italian name. And I was like, fine, I'll name myself that. And then he was reading Henry James at the time. So I named myself Eloisa James, which turned out to be a really good idea because it's short. So it fits in big letters on the front of a book. I didn't know what I was doing back then at all, but it was lucky. I could have called myself Eloisa Abernathy or something and it never would have fit on a book. So I did well. Luck. A lot of writing is luck. I don't know if any of you are writers, but I think a lot of getting published and staying published is hard work and then luck.
Can you name your top 5 favorite authors?
Oh, that's impossible. Lucy, wait 1 second. Lucy, stop that. I have an aging dog. She's very bad. She's licking the carpet. Well, Ilona Andrews is a huge favorite of mine because I love paranormal. Lisa Kleypas is a huge favorite. Julia Quinn is a huge favorite. I mean, I have so many favorites. It's really hard to pick people out that way. I will say that I remembered the name of the Harlequin Presents writer who's my favorite, which is Abby Green. So if you haven't read her, she's fantastic. I really love Susan Elizabeth Phillips. If you've read her new book, I thought it was great. It's called Dance Away With Me. I loved it. I mean, I stayed up and it takes a lot to get me to stay up these days because everything's so stressful. I like sleeping a lot, but I stayed up because the heroine, she did something so fun with the heroine to me. The heroine is grieving, and this is not blowing the plot at all, but she's grieving for her husband who died, I don't know, like 3 years ago or something, 2 years ago. He was a really sweet guy, totally PC, you know, absolutely was always like, do you mind if I touch you here? You know, you seduce me. And then she meets this wild mountain man up on a mountain in like a cabin. And he is not a PC guy. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was totally fun. She's sitting there going, I don't want to seduce you. I want to be seduced. And I thought it was a great way of saying, you know, there's a bit too much policing of what women, how women can be erotic or what we can be erotic about, saying it's wrong or it's right. And I thought Susan handled it in a really thoughtful way. So Lisa, you're going to love that SCP book. I loved it. So.
Besides reading more romance, do you have any recommendations for current romance authors or aspiring writers, including resources and methods?
Including what and methods?
Resources and writing methods.
Okay, well, I have a load of books, but I mean, honestly, these days, if you're writing historical romance, figure out the year you're going to put your book in, type it into Pinterest along with clothing, and then just start following the links. Because I'm writing set in 1740 right now. You can follow the links to museums that will tell you exactly what those clothes are. You can then follow them from museums. You can do the reverse search on a picture. If you know how to do that on Google, you can actually search for images. So if there's a book you love, you can put it into Google Images and search it, and you will come up with these crazy people who are costume experts, and they will tell you like how it's stitched. And you can find out so much, and you can find out anything online now. So I spend a lot of time going down a rabbit hole on various videos with experts, but I enjoy that a lot. There's wonderful things where you can watch somebody actually get dressed, you know, a half an hour video of somebody dressed in Georgian clothing, just to make sure that you have your heroine dressed correctly. But honestly, my best advice is that it doesn't matter if you're writing historical, paranormal, contemporary, Harlequin present, it's all about the plot. If you don't have an interesting and creative plot, you're screwed. Because the thing about romance is that we're constantly writing the same story, right? There's only one story. And it doesn't matter if it's girl meets girl or boy meets, it really doesn't matter. Everyone knows how it's going to end. So you have got to be creative within the bounds of something that the reader knows. And that's really challenging. And I think a lot of people take it on and they're like, oh, see, I have a really pretty heroine, I have a really handsome hero, and this is going to be easy. Well, it is easy, but it won't be interesting. So then you've got to figure out how to make it interesting, and that's hard. So when I am stuck, when I think I'm boring myself, I make a list. I make lists of 10 things. I'm like, well, here's 10 things she could do right now. 10, you have to get all the way to 10. Or here's 10 ways that this plot could totally change. Here's 10 things, 10 horrible things the hero could do to the heroine. I mean, my hero's not going to be like that, but I have to say I do have a soft spot for heroes who are like, get out, that's not my baby, that's my twin brother's baby, you go live in the wild, and you know, whatever. I have a fondness for those. So you think, what's the worst thing he could do? Okay, number 2, what's even worse? Number 3, what's even worse? Number 4, what's the worst thing? And by the time you get to 10, you're going to get to something original, and then you'll have an original plot. You might have to think about it overnight, but you got to get to 10. So that's my real writing advice. And the other thing I'd say is that you have to rewrite. You have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And I really wish that wasn't the case. I wish writing wasn't so hard. I wish it didn't take so long. But everyone I know whose career has lasted, and you remember my first book was bought in 1999. So I've been writing for 21 years. And I wrote a few years before that without selling anything. Everyone I know is constantly reading and constantly thinking and then constantly rewriting, Because if you just rewrite the one idea you have in your head, your career will be short. So that's my advice.
Are there any heroes or heroines you've written that you no longer like as people and characters?
I don't go back and read them, so I don't have to worry about it. But I will say that, you know, times change, and I've been writing for 21 years. If you go back and read my pleasures series, Potent Pleasures, Midnight Pleasures, Enchanting Pleasures, I have a distinct memory of my Potent Pleasures hero calling his wife a whore. Now that would be fine for the time, right? Fine, historically, absolutely accurate, because as far as he's concerned, she got pregnant when he was away. But I really could not get away with that now, and I wouldn't want to. So who you want the hero to be changes as the world changes around you. The key is to figure out whether you can still create the parts of a story that appeal to you. Like I've written a couple of beta heroes. They don't work for me quite as well. So I have to recognize that in myself and leave the beta heroes to someone else. But then I have to write an alpha hero who I consider to be respectable, respectful. Because for me, one of the key things about a romance is not, is it going to last forever? Although mine do happen to last forever. But the definition of the word romance, I think, is, a respectful, sensual, and loving relationship. So that question of respect is really key. And what is respectful between two people changes in the last 20 years a lot. It's changed a lot. What is possible, what isn't, what people find erotic, what they don't. I mean, I'll tell you an example. I got stuck in 7 Minutes in Heaven because I was like, oh, romance trope that I love is a kidnapping. I've never written one. I'm going to write a kidnapping. And then here he is kidnapping her and taking her out of London. And I was like, you know, I'm not actually that comfortable with this. Maybe I've watched too much Criminal Minds and way too much Bones. And then now we're watching Cold Case too. But yeah, he had to stop. He's like, do you mind if I kidnap you? And she's like, oh no, it's fine. I'll have a weekend outside. So you'll see, if you read 7 Minutes in Heaven, there's that tiny little tense exchange in the carriage. And that is based on me wanting to write a kidnapping and realizing I no longer find it as erotic as I used to back when I was reading like Catherine Coulter, you know, before I started writing myself. I used to love those pirate kidnapping books. No, not anymore.
What's the most interesting historical plot you've ever read?
I've ever read? Wow, I don't know. I really can't answer that one. I mean, in a way, history is so much more interesting than any plot you've read or I've read. I will say that I really love plots that are not romance, and I love bringing those aspects in. So one of my favorite writers is the fantasy satirical writer Terry Pratchett, if any of you have read him. He has really complicated, wild, and imaginative plots. And I try to think, what can I do that's imaginative? How can I change this up? How can I do something more imaginative? So Otis getting dressed as a woman, for example. I've never really seen that. Or the heroine saying, okay, I'm going to go along. Fine, he can be my mistress, you know, as a joke. I like to try to write something that no one has written. So to write the plot that hasn't been written yet, it's fun.
Sorry, losing track of questions. Have you ever tried to write in another genre other than fiction?
Well, I wrote a memoir. It's called Paris in Love. And it's about the year when my mother died of cancer. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple of weeks after she died. And then when I got over it, and I'm absolutely fine, and that was way more than 5 years ago, we sold our house in New Jersey, and we sold our cars, and we uprooted the kids, and we moved to Paris. We rented an apartment on the internet, and we went to Paris for a year, and it was a wonderful year. I had, my daughter was 10, and man, she hated Paris. She went through all of Paris with the Harry Potter books in front. She would walk down the streets of Paris just with Harry Potter in front of, so she didn't have to look at this loathsome city that we brought her to. And then my son was in 9th grade, and it was a really funny year. really fun. And I think if you enjoy Paris at all, it's a fun memoir. And it actually has a tiny romance in it. It's a very sweet romance. And just in case you've read Paris in Love, I can tell you they now have a baby. So it's very sweet. Well, she's now 4, I guess, 5. So yeah, time passes. So that was, but the details of the romance in that book are absolutely true. People write me and say, it can't really have been that romantic. I'm like, guess what? The Frenchmen really are that romantic. So it was sweet. And the French woman. So, yeah, so I've written a memoir and I've written nonfiction scholarship because, you know, I'm a Shakespeare professor. So I've had to publish or perish, and you know, I'm a full professor, so I had to write a book and a bunch of articles, so I did that. And now I'm writing a different kind of fiction. That these romances come out with HarperCollins, and this other fiction is going to come out as Mary Bly. Is the book is called Lizzie and Dante, and it's going to come out, I think, as women's fiction. So.
And speaking to your working in academia, have you ever received any pushback from your peers about writing in romance?
Oh yeah, I didn't tell them for a long time. I kept my 2 lives completely separate. There was a bit of a problem when People magazine wanted to put my name in. They made me page turner of the week, and they were like, we have to put a picture in. And I went to the chair of my department at that point, and I said, listen, I have this other life. And he was like, you will never get tenure. Do not do that. So I waited until I got tenure, and I'd hit 1 through 15 on the New York Times list, which is sort of where you want to be. And then I just brought in a big box of books into a department meeting and told them, and they were shocked. But one of the fun things about that is that they were like, okay, you have to go around to all the deans. There's 5 deans of Fordham and Sheldon. It was 4 deans and 1 woman. So I get into the woman's office. She's no longer a dean now. She's retired. She's like, what? Eloisa James? Wait, I love your books. And I was like, Nancy, we've been working together. I was the director of graduate studies. She was the dean of the graduate school. I'm like, my picture's on the back of those books. And she was like, yeah, but I never look at the picture. Who cares who you are? I just read the books. So it was really funny, and it was very sweet. And since then, as it turned out, my chair was wrong because, of course, Fordham, like any university, is like, whoa, we have a best-selling author, right? Do you want to go on tour with the president? Do you want to meet all these alumni who want to be bestsellers? Why don't you come give a panel that normally people would pay you for, but now you're going to do it for free every year? You know? So it's been fun. It's fun. I mean, now I get a lot of kids taking my Shakespeare class, and they're like, my mom said that if she's paying Fordham tuition, she has to take a class with you. But I don't teach creative writing. I really only teach Shakespeare. And then I teach freshman composition because I really love teaching freshmen. So starting in the fall, I'll have another group of 16 freshmen. It's always really fun teaching them. They have no idea who I am, and they are just boggled to be freshmen. It's the best year, I think.
And now we're coming to the end of our time and questions are answered. But what we usually do about now is we let people unmute themselves and we do a bit of a round robin in case they want to talk to you for a couple minutes.
Okay, and I will add, I think that Charlene is going to give a book away. Charlene's got some books. So how do you want to do it, Charlene? She's quiet.
Do you want me to unmute you?
No, I can't unmute her.
Am I unmuted?
There you
go. I'll just post something in Castle Lindau afterwards, and probably one of the hardback books. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. We've got some hardbacks, and we'll leave it up for 24 hours and let everybody sign up. Okay. Think of a good question.
That's a good question, guys. What's your favorite COVID quarantine activity? Do not say sex. Anything else is fine. Give us some ideas. I mean, here I am painting the carpet, but the carpet's not going to last forever. I need some new ideas. I already learned how to bake bread, so I'm done with that. Are you guys still baking? No. I did it for a while. It was great. But then I was like, I even did the starter, you know, the freaking whatever it is,
The
starter.
sourdough. We're
Sourdough
doing
starter. I had
sourdough.
that going.
We're
And I was
still
like, I've already
doing that.
raised babies. I'm sick of this thing.
We're still doing it, but only one loaf a week because there's a point where it starts hitting your waistline. You're like, this can't continue.
Exactly. Yeah, my husband started getting massive reflux, and he's like, "It's your bread." Oh well.
I'm
He's
just
allergic
tired of
to bread.
cooking because I feel like I have my kids at home, the older one who's back from college, and my husband was home for 2 months before his office opened up. So I'm like, I'm just tired of cooking.
So am I.
And
I'm tired of
dishes.
cleaning too.
Yes,
Cooking and
dishes
cleaning.
are horrible.
Yeah, and dealing with like shopping. I mean, the whole thing.
Well, I will tell y'all a warning. I'm really bearing myself now. I don't know if it's the if it's all the cooking at home or all the boxes, but we've been here for 30 something years and now we have roaches.
Ah,
And we don't know why. So I don't know if they've come in on all the packages or it's food or what, but we are under massive attack on them. So
you
watch
know
out
what
for
we've got, Charlene? We've got ants. Tiny, tiny, tiny little ants.
We have those too.
We've never had those.
We get them in the summertime for some reason, only the last 2 years. And even the Ehrlich guy who comes, he's like, those tiny ones, they can't do anything about it. They just show up in weird places. Like we'll be reading a book and is like sitting on top of the book. And then my 11-year-old
Yeah.
screaming.
Exactly. My daughter was screaming, "There's an ant on my bed. There's an ant on my bed." I'm like, what am I going to do? I did the same thing. I called the super and he's like, "There's nothing I can do." I'm like,
Yeah, the tiny ones apparently they can't do anything about, which my husband doesn't understand, but it's just the way it is.
Charlene,
Well,
you
those
gotta get those roach traps.
Oh yeah, we may die before the roaches do, based on everything we've put out. But
I live in the mountains.
I put boxes in the
research.
garage as soon as I can. Like as soon as like the 3 days is done of waiting to open them, I put them in the garage right away.
yeah, I think that's part of it. I just think we've had more deliveries, more boxes,
Right.
more food in the house than usual.
Yeah.
We're cleaning everything, but you know, you can get, they're the little German roaches. You can get one and then everybody they know and all their family shows up.
Oh no.
They invite them all.
Oh no. Oh.
Eloisa, what do your kids think of you writing romance, especially since you have a daughter and a son? Like, what do they think about it?
Not much. Nobody reads my books in my family. Nobody. I mean, I think my son is, he's never said much about, he's a very quiet type. And now he's in Washington, D.C. He's actually living with his girlfriend, whom we adore. So that's really nice. She's baking and he is doing the cooking. So I'm very proud of him. He's a very equitable fellow. I think Anna is, I think they're both vaguely proud of it, but they're not. This is so ironic, but he reads nonfiction and Anna doesn't really like reading all that much. She's an artist and she likes watching like Criminal Minds and Forensic Files and, stuff like that. But that's the thing that if my husband and I are both professors and neither one of them enjoyed college very much. And it's the way it goes, right? It's just, my husband and I, he grew up in Florence, Italy, and the one thing he wanted was to get out. And I grew up in a farm in Minnesota, and I was like, I'm getting out. I remember I had a book about New York, and it was like, I forget, it was called the Stairstep Family or something. And there was this family that had 8 children, and they lived in New York City. And I was like, that's where I'm going to live. And I was like 7 years old. So I made it here. But my kids are like, da-da-da, whatever. They're easygoing. So, yeah.
Does your husband ever recognize scenes from your book and be like, we did that in real life?
You know what, honey? That would mean he read them, right? And he's a good reader. I mean, at some point he was like, yeah, I'm going to read them. I'm going to read one. I'm going to read one. He's a Dante scholar. He does medieval Italian literature. And we're on the beach, and I've given him one of my favorite books. And at this point, I'd probably only written like 5. And I looked over, and he was reading Don Quixote, if you know what that is. I was like, what are you doing? You were reading my book. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm just taking a break. I'm taking a break. And I was like, this book is not working. I took it away and I've never given him another one. And, you know, one of the things I've been doing is like Marie Kondoing this whole apartment. So I got all the books that are in foreign languages. So I brought some to him because the libraries, they'll send a little list and they're like, this library, you know, my neighborhood likes Japanese, Norwegian, and Greek. And then someone else likes Portuguese, Japanese, and French. So you can't just send them anything. You sort of have to sort them out. So I had books all over the living room for 3 days this last week, and I was sorting them into boxes to send. And I brought some books to him, and I'm like, what language is this? Because he speaks like 6 languages. He was looking at it, he was like, oh, this one's Norwegian. Look, I know that word. And then I was like, how about this one? He said, this is Greek. I can read Greek. And he opens up, he's like, maybe I'll read this one. And I was like, you're not reading in English and you're not reading in Italian. You can't have my Greek book. I'm giving it to a library. I sent it off. It's something, I mean, I hear this from other writers. I'm not the only one. You have to write, and you have to rely on the people who love romance to be the ones who sustain you when you get bad reviews or when you get crushed or when you get your contract canceled or something, because your family's just not gonna, that's not what they're there for. They're to love you and everything, but they often are not romance readers. In fact, I don't know anyone really who has romance readers for family. I did have my niece, Nora, who's mentioned in several of my books. She read a whole bunch of them. So that was cool. And then my niece, Zoe, who'd never read any romances, wrote the tearjerker that I have coming out. It's kind of like The Fault in Our Stars. And she read it in one whole day and the night. And then she handed it back and she said, this is everything. And I was like, yes. She's a heart. She doesn't read.
Is it a YA book, the one that you have coming out?
No, it's not. It's a love story about a Shakespeare professor who goes to Elba, which is an island off the coast of Italy, and falls in love with a chef. But he has a daughter. And so some of the chapters are from the daughter's point of view. And she has cancer. So
the daughter does?
No, the heroine.
The heroine.
And what I wanted to think about was, I've been writing romance my whole life, right? And there's an implicit promise in the end of romance that my characters will live forever and always be loving. And in my head, they do, right? They're all of them. They're all exactly the same age and they have lovely children and, you know, it's great. But I wanted to write a book that was a romance that faced a bit more of the challenges that I've seen in my life, which is when she's falling in love. Do you fall in love? Do you let yourself fall in love? If there's a 13-year-old daughter, 11-year-old daughter, I can't remember at the moment, my own book, 11-year-old daughter who is dying for a mother. Is it better to have a mother for, you know, a few years than have no mother?
Was it difficult to write about cancer though, because of your mother and then yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, it was, but you know, it was also really cathartic. And I've had friends pass away from cancer. So the great thing about being a writer is you can pour emotion onto the page and you can get to a different place. And I write about love, and I think love is stronger than death. That's from the Song of Psalms, and I believe it. So this book is about that. And there is no death scene, in case you're wondering. I quit before that. It's a tearjerker, but not like The Fault in Our Stars with that endless like dying, everyone's dying in the car, dying some more. Anna loved that book so much and she read it aloud to me and I was like weeping hysterically. So, and then she made me watch the movie. That's a step too far for me. I like the love story part.
I had my mother passed away from cancer as well. And so I just find it more interesting when they have the adults in the books have them, because there's been a lot of books with children. And I think the dynamic is different for the family when it's a parent. So yeah. That's why I think it's like, that's why I'm wondering, was it like difficult in that sense to write from that sense?
Yeah, because, you know, when I got diagnosed, my mother's children were all grown up. She declined further treatment. She didn't want chemo. And she was just like, this is not worth it. She had ovarian cancer, you know, so it's, you know, that's a silent killer. I hope you're all getting checked, etc. Yeah. But she was, you know, older, not old enough from my point of view, but from her point of view, her children were all grown. They were all in happy relationships. They all had children. And she was like, I'm not going to do this chemo and, you know, gain 6 months of misery. So it's a very different story if you're diagnosed when your children are young, I think. And so it was really interesting to write about and very, very cathartic, very real to me. I'm hoping everyone likes it. It's in that weird period right now where this is creepy, you guys. So it took me 3 years to write, and then the book sold right away to Random House to Susan Campbell, who was the publisher of Random House. So, you know, huge. She does the Shopaholic books. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. She did 2 revisions of the novel, and then she suddenly died of cancer. She gave me the revisions, the second round of revisions. She was diagnosed like 2 days later, and she died 3 weeks after that. She didn't even know she had cancer. So that was really hard. And I had her revisions to do, and she'd passed away. So I lost like another 6 months because I loved her so much. I mean, she was the editor for Paris in Love too, back when I wrote that, you know, 7 years ago. So she was such a great person. So I had trouble opening the book for like 6 months, but they gave it to a wonderful editor who's the publisher of Dial Press. And she's been great. And I'm just finishing the second round of edits for her. She didn't touch anything that Susan had done. So the book is this really interesting thing now where all of Susan's edits are in there, and now all of Whitney's edits are in there. And it's become this, it's like a co-written book. Susan was a wonderful, wonderful editor. She edited like the Guernsey Potato Society. She had incredibly eclectic tastes, from the Shopaholics to all sorts of literary fiction. So I was really lucky to have her work on my book. I don't want to end on that down note.
When's it coming out?
That, it looks like it's going to come out in the summer, and they are pushing for June, which would make it a beach book. Just a little scary because those are big books. And it's the first Mary Bly book, so I kind of thought it would just like slide under the radar, you know, like they wanted Eloisa, and I was like, no, this is a book where my Eloisa readers have to be given the chance to decide whether they want to buy this. I don't want anyone picking it up and not knowing. So this way I can tell you who it is, but it's got a different name, and I can present it to you in a different way, and you know what you're getting into. So we don't always feel like reading something that is more challenging. I think. I don't.
Will your next, will the Jones book come out next summer as well then?
No, that they moved that one forward. That's why I got to get on the stick with this book. I have got
coming out earlier.
The next book coming out is My Last Duchess, which comes out at the end of October. And that is the free story that I was writing in case you registered for pre-orders. It was the story of Ophelia and the third Duchess. And they asked me to add another 100 pages to that. And they're bringing it out as a book. It's a less expensive ebook just by itself, but then in print, it's going to contain one of the novellas that has never been published in print, because I have a lot of readers in print who are disappointed if things are only an E. So they put them together. So that'll be out at the end of October. And then the end of March, I believe, is Wild Child, which is Jones' book. And then the hardcover Mary Bly looks like June. So I don't know for sure about that though. So it's a big.
Oh, so you have several books coming out very quickly. It's
I
this
do.
time.
You?
Yeah. And they're like, what are you going to do for the tour? I'm like, are you telling me there's going to be a vaccine? what am I going to be #1 in the line for this vaccine? It's nerve-wracking.
With all that you're doing, how do you find time to sleep?
It's a lot. You know what? I have a male thing that I learned when I was in grad school. You know what guys do? They're like, right now, I'm going to write this thing. And this is the best I can do. Here it is. And women are like, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. And so with my academic work, I try to model way more, you know, as chair of the department, I model the male chairs who were all male before me. And they're sort of like, okay, this is the amount of time I can give to this a day. I am not going to stay up all night and answer email to, you know, for anxious students. I do the best I can.
Speaking of men, you already answered my question about first-time readers, what you'd recommend to them. But what if we wanted to get our husbands to read your books, or any men in our lives to read your books, what book would you recommend for one of the men folk to try?
You know, I have, over the years, my male readership has gone from 7% to 12%. So I have a good, hefty, silent minority of male readers. However, I can't say that I have any idea what their favorite is. I guess I would stick with Beauty and the Beast because they probably read House and they probably enjoy that, you know, because a fairy tale is a one-off. The reason why I don't usually recommend series to new readers is that it feels daunting. I know for me, like I go online, I'm desperate for new books, and if it says, you know, number 13 in the Crow trilogy, I'm like, oh my God, I can't, you know, I don't have time for this. Like, I can't do it. I can handle like a trilogy, especially if it's only on number 2, I can go back to number 1. So I generally tell people to read, there's one, A Kiss at Midnight. It's another favorite because it's Cinderella. But I don't know what men write me, right? They're always correcting my historical facts. That's mainly their interactions. They're like, yeah.
They're
I just one
mansplaining
guy
to the
who writes
author.
me from,
Wonderful.
oh, he writes me from Australia. Like, I'm not kidding, like once a week. And he sends me all kinds of historical articles and ideas that I could use. Today, he sent me an article and it was all about, they have found bodies in France. Did you guys read about this? They're like from the guillotines. They're aristocrats from the guillotines, and they found a bunch of bodies like walled up inside. I kind of skimmed the articles. It's on the depressing side. But he sends me stuff like this all the time. It's like, you could put this in a book. I'm like, oh, that's a cheerful topic. But often if I put something really original into Lindau Castle, like a historical thing, that'll be from my buddy in Australia. He reads all the books. Then he tells me what I got wrong.
For Wild Child, do you feel like you were saying, like it's almost like a farce? Like, do you feel, have you been inspired by some of like the Shakespeare comedies then, like As You Like It or things like that, you know, in that sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. I borrowed tons of stuff from Shakespeare, so loads. In this book, I mean, the thing about that is you can put some Shakespeare in there. It's got to be pretty low key because most of my readers do not want to be reading about Shakespeare. They want to read a fun romance. It's an escape. They don't want to be reading, you know, it's not like they're in college, right? So this one, I've got some things that are out of Hamlet. I don't know if you had to read Hamlet in high school or college. Ophelia climbs in Hamlet's window, right? She goes in a maid and she doesn't come out a maid. And that's one of the reasons why she goes mad and drowns herself in the creek. Well, my heroine is going to climb in the window too, but of course she's not going to go mad and she's going nowhere near the river. But I'm doing you can bring up a play and then you can put little details in there that if people want to check on my website or if they remember the play will be kind of fun for them, because you've got to create a book like it's not resounding on different levels. Some people will write and say, I skip all the sex scenes. And some people are like, why aren't your sex scenes a lot longer? So you're writing for all kinds of readers. Well, oh, Charlene is saying My American Duchess is a great starter book. I would agree with that. That's another one-off. And it's got really fun details about pineapples. So pineapples in the period, as it were. All right, I'm getting hoarse, so maybe I should say good night to get up tomorrow morning.
Well, thank you very much for
lovely.
Thanks, Eloisa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eloisa. Amazing.
Thank you.
Totally
Thank
fun
you.
talking to you guys. Go in there into Lindau and win a hardcover, okay? We'll send you hardcovers and some swag and stuff. So lots of love.
Thanks.
Stay safe, right?
You too. Have a
Be
good night.
careful. Wear your mask. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.